My father humiliated me in front of 400 guests. He gave my brother the company and gave me a seat near the kitchen doors. 3 days later, I owned more of it than he did. But this story did not begin with revenge. It began the way most family wounds begin, quietly, repeatedly, so early that everyone mistakes it for love. My name is Naomi Halden. I was 29 when my family finally learned that being underestimated can become very expensive. My brother Julian was 33, and for as long as I can remember, people treated him like a gift the world had personally delivered. He was handsome in the easy way that makes strangers trust someone too quickly. Tall, sharp jaw, calm smile, expensive looking even in school uniforms. He learned fast, spoke well, and moved through rooms as if doors were naturally meant to open for him. At 10, he won academic awards. At 14, he captained teams. He was accepted into one of the best business schools in the country. My father framed the letter. My mother cried while reading it aloud to relatives. I was sitting 3 feet away. No one asked how my own exams had gone. That was the rhythm of our house. Julian arrived like fireworks. I arrived like furniture. I was never called a failure. That would have required attention. I was called practical, steady, sweet. Those are often the nicer words families use when they have quietly decided you are not the main story. I studied harder than Julian ever needed to. He could skim a chapter once and discuss it over dinner. I rewrote notes, color-coded folders, stayed awake past midnight, asked teachers for extra help, and still landed somewhere in the safe middle of every ranking. When I got into university from the waitlist, I was proud. I had fought for that place. At dinner, my father carved roast chicken and announced it to guests like a joke. Naomi made it in by 1 inch. Warm laughter. Then he lifted his wine glass. But a win is a win. Everyone smiled, so I smiled too. Across the table, my grandmother Margaret did not smile. She simply raised her glass a fraction toward me. It was the smallest gesture. But in a house where approval was distributed publicly and unevenly, it felt enormous. Margaret Halden was my father's mother and the true founder of Halden Retail Group. People credited my father for expanding it. That was only half true. My grandmother built the first properties when banks preferred lending to incompetent men over competent women. She negotiated leases while pregnant, collected overdue rent herself, and once fired a contractor by repeating his excuses back to him until he heard how foolish they sounded. She had steel where other people had moods. My father inherited a machine. She built one. That difference matters more than families admit. When Julian came home from school breaks, life reorganized itself around him. Favorite meals, guests invited, stories requested. My mother asked about professors. My father asked about markets. When I came home, I was asked if I could pick up dry cleaning on the way. At 22, I graduated with a business degree no one celebrated, because Julian had just completed a prestigious internship overseas. At 23, I joined Halden Retail Group. My father called it a sensible place to start. You are not leadership material. My first desk sat on the 7th floor beside the service corridor. No window. One broken drawer. Lights that hummed like trapped insects. Julian's first office would later have skyline views and smoked glass. My first week involved sewage backups, angry tenants, and replacing a failed HVAC contractor. His involved strategy lunches. Mine involved reality. That difference would matter later. Because roofs leak equally on everyone, customers leave silently. Bad leases do not care about bloodlines. And problems tell the truth faster than executives do. At family dinners, nothing changed. My father asked Julian where retail was heading in 5 years. My mother asked which investors impressed him. Then someone would glance politely at me. And Naomi? Still busy? Still busy. As if my life were a waiting room. I always answered kindly. Because when you are the ordinary child, anger gets labeled bitterness, silence gets labeled maturity, and invisibility gets labeled peace. But while they admired Julian, I was learning. Learning who solved things, who took credit, who panicked when details became consequences, who ignored workers paid less than them, who spoke beautifully and delivered badly. I also learned something dangerous. People speak honestly around those they do not fear. Managers complained freely in front of me. Vendors told me truths they hid from executives. Maintenance teams explained where money was wasted. Regional staff warned me which directors lied in reports. No one guarded themselves around Naomi. A pause, but not leadership. Useful work. Even now he could not stop diminishing the labor that kept his company alive. I opened the packets in front of me. Then let's discuss leadership. I slid folders down the table. Blue tabs marked sections. Lease exposure, cash compression, attrition risk, deferred maintenance, vanity spend. Pages turned. The room grew quieter. Page 3 shows 9 underperforming leases approved in the last 18 months at rates unsupported by local demographics. Page turn. Page 5 shows reserves down 22%, while prestige marketing spend rose 40%. Page turn. Page 7 lists 6 senior resignations in 10 months, mostly execution-heavy roles. Page turn. Page 9 outlines deferred repairs, carrying liability risk across 3 centers. These numbers lack context. I met his eyes. They lacked denial. Julian stood. She assembled this from partial data. No, I said. I assembled it from departments no one thought to silence. That landed. Because it was true. People speak honestly to the overlooked. Then I removed a small speaker from my bag. My father's face changed immediately. I pressed play. Julian's voice filled the room from a recorded planning call. We can temporarily divest logistics, improve valuation optics, then reacquire later if needed. Another voice asked about operational risk. Julian laughed. Markets reward the story first. I stopped the audio. Silence. Not dramatic silence. Disappointed silence. The kind that costs careers. Julian stared at me. Where did you get that? From someone who preferred the company survive. He looked around sharply. No one met his eyes. Robert folded his hands. Mr. Halden, were you proposing sale of core infrastructure to improve appearance metrics? It was exploratory, Julian said too quickly. It was reckless, I said. My father rose halfway from his chair. This is a coordinated ambush. I turned to him. No. Then softly. This is what accountability feels like when it arrives late. Robert cleared his throat. We now move to governance motions. Everyone expected blood, termination, scandal, a daughter humiliating father and brother for years of disrespect. They were ready for revenge. What they were not ready for was discipline. I stood as controlling shareholder. I moved that Victor Halden remain employed. Confusion crossed faces. My father blinked. Julian exhaled in relief too soon. I continued. Under immediate restructuring terms. Now everyone leaned forward. Victor Halden will transition today to founder emeritus. Robert's brows rose. I kept going. Ceremonial title. Advisory presence by request only. No signing authority. No hiring authority. No board vote. My father's color drained slowly. You cannot. I can. I turned one page. He will retain a private office on floor 12 and conduct one monthly leadership seminar for management trainees. A director coughed to hide laughter. Then I looked at Julian. And Julian Halden will remain employed. His spine straightened. As regional turnaround director. He froze. You will assume responsibility for our 6 weakest performing properties for 12 months. I slid another packet toward him. On-site presence required. KPI compensation only. No executive assistant. Weekend audits mandatory. This is insane, he said. No, I replied calmly. This is educational. My father found his voice. You are humiliating your own family. I held his gaze. No. Then I gave him the sentence he had earned. I am introducing consequences. Robert looked around the room. All in favor? Hands rose. One after another. Not bravely. Not dramatically. Just realistically. Because power rarely falls in explosions. Usually it falls when enough people stop pretending. Motion carried. My father sat down slowly, like gravity had become personal. Julian remained standing 1 second longer, unable to process a world where charm had no voting rights. Then he sat too. Outside the glass walls, thousands of ordinary people kept working. Opening stores, fixing problems, keeping promises, doing the useful work. Men like my father, never respected enough. For the first time in that boardroom's history, someone like them had won. People think revenge is loud. It isn't. Real revenge is procedural. It is watching people who believe themselves untouchable discover that rules now apply to them. The board meeting ended at 12:17. By 12:30, word had reached every floor. By 1 o'clock, executives who had ignored me for years wanted to align priorities. By 2, my father's assistant was crying in the hallway. Power does not improve memory. It accelerates it. I spent the afternoon in a temporary office, while legal teams updated signatures, banking controls, reporting lines, and access permissions. My father spent the afternoon refusing to leave his old office. That issue arrived at 3:10. Robert Hensley entered with the expression of a man tired of wealthy men behaving like children. Victor has locked the door. I looked up. Physically, yes. Has he said anything? He informed security, this is still his building. Let's go. When we reached the executive floor, half the corridor was pretending not to watch. My father's office door was shut. From inside came drawers slamming. I knocked once. Dad. Silence. Then, you don't get to call me that today. I almost smiled. Open the door. This circus ends in a month. Then you can enjoy being wrong from floor 12. The handle jerked. Then the door opened. Victor Halden stood in the center of the office. He had mistaken for identity. Face red. Family photographs already packed in a box. Even now he understood symbols. You think this is victory? He asked quietly. No. I kept my voice calm. This is transition. He laughed bitterly. You always hide behind language. And you always hid behind certainty. He stepped closer. You are not me. Thank God. For 1 second, I thought he might slap me. Instead, he looked away first. That surprised us both. I gestured to the box. IT will transfer the rest. You're enjoying this. I considered lying. No. A beat. I'm respecting it. Respecting what? The fact that consequences should feel real. I turned and left him there. Not broken, but limited. That was enough. Julian's first meeting under his new role was scheduled for 7 a.m. the next morning. I chose the time personally. Conference room B. No skyline. Plastic water pitchers. Weak coffee. 6 folders waited on the table, one for each failing property now under his control. He arrived at 7:08. Wrinkled shirt. No smile. Good. I was seated with Teresa Morrow, head of field operations, and 2 regional managers. Teresa was the kind of woman who could silence executives using only eye contact. Julian stopped in the doorway. What are you doing here? Observing your onboarding. This is unnecessary. Teresa spoke before I could. So is being late. I opened folder 1. Northgate comments. Theft increase, occupancy decline, HVC liabilities. Folder 2. Cedar Point Plaza. Parking redesign failure from your branding plan. Traffic down 14%. Folder 3. Brookmere Plaza. You remember that one. His jaw tightened. By folder 6, he looked like a man discovering gravity. Then I slid the final sheet toward him. 12-month compensation structure. He read it. This is lower than my previous salary. It's insulting. It's performance-based. He laughed once. You're punishing me. I leaned back. No, Julian. I let the silence sharpen. I'm introducing you to reality. He looked around the room for support. There was none. Teresa handed him a hard hat. Site visit leaves in 10. He stared at it like it might stain him. I stood to leave. At the door, he said my name. I turned. You wanted this for years, didn't you? That deserved honesty. No. I held his gaze. I wanted to be taken seriously. For years. Then I walked out. My mother arrived at headquarters that afternoon, wearing oversized sunglasses indoors. She removed them dramatically, once inside my office. Her eyes were swollen. She stopped pacing. For the first time, he looked less angry than confused. How did you know all this? Because I had lived where he never visited. Because invisible work leaves maps and the people doing it. Because while he learned to impress rooms, I learned what rooms hide. But I only said, I listened. He left without another word. 2 weeks later, Teresa forwarded me a report. Julian had spent 6 hours helping reset a failing storefront layout at Cedar Point. No speech, no audience. Interesting. My father adapted differently. Victor treated floor 12 like exile. His new office was tasteful, private, and powerless. He complained about everything: smaller desk, shared assistant, worse coffee, longer elevator ride. She missed authority the way addicts miss oxygen. Yet his monthly trainee lectures became unexpectedly popular. At first, younger managers attended because required. Then they kept attending because stripped of image management. My father finally told the truth. How he nearly lost our second property through over-leveraging. How fear ruined one negotiation and saved another. How Margaret once fired a cousin before dessert. How growth without discipline becomes vanity. One afternoon I stood outside unnoticed and heard him say, "Never confuse being obeyed with being respected." The room wrote it down. So did I. Power had hidden parts of him worth knowing. Losing it exposed them. I found that tragic and useful. My mother changed most quietly. Elaine stopped hosting status dinners. Stopped posting polished family photos. Stopped speaking about image. She started calling me on Sundays. At first, conversations lasted 4 minutes. Weather, traffic, health. Then one day she asked, "Were you lonely growing up?" I almost dropped the phone. "Yes." Long silence. "I think I knew," she said softly. That sentence hurt more than denial would have, because denial can be fought. Recognition arrives too late. Still, we kept talking. Healing is less dramatic than revenge. Mostly it sounds like awkward honesty. By quarter's end, results appeared. Vendor trust improved. Turnover slowed. 2 failing sites stabilized. Cash reserves strengthened. Board members who once spoke over me now asked for my opinion. Not because I had transformed. Because performance is a language even biased people eventually learn. Julian requested a meeting. Voluntarily. He entered my office carrying no complaint folders. Just a notebook. "I need capital approval for Brookmere." "For what?" "Lighting redesign. Better sightlines. Family seating. Food court visibility." I stared at him. Those were nearly the same recommendations I had made years earlier. He noticed. "Yes," he said. I waited. I should have listened then. The sentence seemed painful for him to produce. "Try not to waste a chance." He nodded, then hesitated. "I was good at easy things," he said quietly. I said nothing. Being admired, being prepared, being the person everyone expected. He looked around my office. "This is harder." "Yes." He gave a short laugh. "You always made hard things look boring." "That's because hard things usually are." For the first time in our lives, we both smiled honestly at the same moment. Winter arrived. Halden Group posted its healthiest quarter in 3 years. No gala, no speeches, no magazine covers. Just truth doing slow work. That night, alone in my apartment, I opened the leather case Margaret had given me. Inside were old deeds, handwritten notes, tenant letters, and one final sealed envelope with my name. I held it for a long time before opening it. Because some inheritances grow heavier after you earn them. And I had a feeling. My grandmother was not finished teaching me yet. The final envelope inside my grandmother's leather case was smaller than I expected. Cream paper. My name written in her sharp, disciplined handwriting. No flourish. No softness. Even affection from Margaret Halden looked professionally formatted. I sat alone at my kitchen table and opened it carefully. Inside was a single folded letter. "Naomi, If you are reading this, then one of two things has happened. Either I judged you correctly, or the rest of the family became even more disappointing than expected. I laughed out loud, then cried immediately after, emotion arriving only after wit. Very her. I kept reading. You were never my choice because you were nicer than Julian, nor because you were overlooked, and certainly not because I enjoy dramatic surprises, though I admit some appreciation for timing. I chose you because you understand a truth most ambitious people never learn. Things must work before they can impress. Your father mistakes control for strength. Your mother mistakes appearances for peace. Your brother mistakes talent for entitlement. Do not make your own mistake by confusing pain with wisdom. Being hurt does not automatically make people better. Choose discipline. Choose truth. Choose people who carry weight quietly. Then the line that stopped me. Forgive only when forgiveness protects you more than it protects them. I read it 3 times. All year, people had asked if I forgave my family, as if forgiveness were a ribbon to cut once the audience liked the ending. My grandmother understood something deeper. Forgiveness is structure. It must be built where it can hold weight. Spring arrived early. Brookmere Plaza reopened after renovations Julian had overseen personally. Better lighting, visible food court, family seating, improved traffic flow. Traffic rose within weeks. He sent me the numbers with no commentary. I replied with one word. Another message arrived. Lunch? We met at a small diner halfway between Brookmere and headquarters, the kind of place my family once called charming when they met beneath us. Julian looked different, less polished, more present. He ordered coffee without checking the cup for chips. Progress. I owe you an apology, he said. I let silence do what Margaret taught it to do. He continued. I believed what was easiest to believe. He looked down. That I earned everything because I was better. I never asked what it cost you. There are apologies that beg for absolution. This was not one of them. It was simply true. I hated you for a while, I admitted. He nodded. I know. I don't anymore. He exhaled slowly, like a man setting down something heavy. Neither of us used the word forgiveness. Some things improve when left unnamed. My father's retirement became official in June. He insisted on a modest event, which, for Victor Haldon, meant only 200 guests. He stood at the podium, older than I remembered. Perhaps humility ages people faster than stress. He thanked board members, investors, staff, and my late grandmother. Then he paused. People shifted in surprise. Victor Haldon did not pause publicly unless he wanted to dominate silence. This pause felt different. And my daughter Naomi, he said. His voice was steady, but not armored. She taught me that inheritance and leadership are not the same thing. The room applauded. I did not cry. Not because I felt nothing, because I no longer needed that sentence the way I once would have. After the event, he approached me privately near the coat room. Still dramatic, I thought. I was hard on you, yes. I thought pressure built strength. Sometimes it builds distance. He absorbed that. Then nodded. We were not repaired. But we were honest. That was more valuable. My mother changed in quieter ways. She sold half the jewelry she never wore and funded scholarships for first-generation students studying operations, logistics, and supply chain management. Not finance, not executive leadership. Operations. She noticed me noticing. We said nothing. That too was progress. Haldon Group entered its strongest year in a decade. Teresa ran the company with ruthless competence and zero patience for nonsense. I remained executive chair, focused on long-term strategy, culture, acquisitions, and succession systems, designed specifically to prevent dynastic stupidity. That became my favorite category of work. We promoted site managers into senior roles. We tied bonuses to retention, maintenance standards, and sustainable margins instead of vanity headlines. We stopped trying to look exceptional and became effective. Markets rewarded us anyway. Funny how often substance catches up. One evening in late autumn, I visited the first property my grandmother had ever developed. A small neighborhood retail strip. Pharmacy, bakery, hardware store, laundromat. Nothing glamorous. I sat on the same bench where she had once asked me why a shopping center was failing. Children ran past with cookies. An elderly man loaded detergent into his trunk. The bakery owner waved because I bought bread there like anyone else. No one cared about board votes. No one cared about succession drama. They cared whether lights worked, whether rent stayed fair, whether doors opened on time, whether the place remained alive. That was the real empire. Not towers, not galas, not applause. I unfolded my grandmother's letter one more time. Choose people who carry weight quietly. I looked around at clerks closing registers, delivery drivers unloading boxes, parents guiding tired children toward cars. Ordinary people, the kind my family once overlooked, the kind I once feared being. Then I understood Margaret's final lesson. I was never the ordinary child. I was simply standing in a family that cannot recognize value unless it arrived shining. They thought I was too ordinary to lead, but ordinary people keep promises. Ordinary people solve problems. Ordinary people hold systems together, while brilliant people give speeches about them. If you have ever been the overlooked one, the underestimated one, the person they politely place near the kitchen doors, listen carefully. You do not need to become dazzling to matter. You need to become undeniable. And sometimes the greatest revenge is not taking what they loved. It is building something better with what they ignored. Why would they? I was only the daughter who tried. The daughter placed near the edge of family photos. The daughter my father once described as someone who would have a stable life. What none of them understood was this. The person no one notices often sees everything. And while my family spent years polishing Julian into the perfect heir, someone else was quietly preparing me for something much more dangerous than praise. She was preparing me to be right. If my parents were raising Julian to be admired, my grandmother was teaching me how the world actually worked. She never once asked about my grades. She asked what I noticed. When I was 13, Margaret Halden picked me up on a Saturday morning in her cream-colored sedan and told the driver to head downtown. Where are we going? I asked. To school. It's summer. Exactly, she said. Less noise. We arrived at Brookmere Plaza, one of our older shopping centers. It had fading tile floors, weak lighting, tired storefronts, and the smell of cinnamon pretzels fighting with bleach. To me, it looked normal. To Margaret, normal was often another word for decline. She bought me hot chocolate and sat me on a bench facing the main corridor. Tell me why this place is losing money. I'm 13, and yet the question remains. So I looked. Really looked. Families entered through the east doors, then turned left, because the right corridor felt darker. The food court was hidden too far back. Parents had nowhere comfortable to sit, near the children's play area. The best storefront near the entrance sold office printers no one wanted to browse for fun. The directory sign was too small. 3 decorative plants were dead. I started listing things aloud. Margaret smiled slowly. There you are. That became our ritual. Every few weeks, she took me somewhere connected to the business. A strip mall near the highway. A warehouse with shipping delays. An empty unit in a rich neighborhood. A busy center making no money. She never lectured. She asked questions sharp enough to force thinking. Why do customers walk faster here? Why is the coffee kiosk crowded, but the bakery beside it empty? Why do people avoid that corner? Why is this manager blaming weather for numbers that were bad before rain? At first, I guessed. Eventually, I saw patterns. The bakery sold atmosphere to people in a hurry. Wrong offer, wrong place. The dark corner wasn't cursed. It was badly sightlined. The manager blaming weather was hiding staffing problems. Margaret praised rarely. So when she did, it mattered. Good, she'd say. One word. I would feel taller for days. At 16, she gave me $500 in cash, inside a plain envelope. Start something. With what? Anything that can fail honestly. So I bought returned home goods from liquidation lots online. Damaged packaging, kitchen sets, missing one spoon. I cleaned them, repaired what I could, photographed them in daylight, and resold them. The first month I made $200. The second month, nearly $900. I tracked margins, shipping costs, refund rates, timing. When I proudly showed my father the spreadsheet, he skimmed it for 3 seconds. That's cute. Cute. The word people use when they need your effort to stay small. I told Margaret later, expecting sympathy. Good. Good? If he understood it, he'd interfere. Then she tapped my notebook. $10 repeated 1,000 times beats one dramatic deal people clap for. Julian, meanwhile, spent summers at networking programs and leadership camps, where young men in loafers learned to say bold things confidently. My mother saved every certificate. My father framed photos. No one framed the Saturday I helped a kiosk owner double sales by moving products children could reach and placing impulse items near checkout. That was fine. Invisible wins still count. At 18, Margaret took me to one of our warehouses. We stood on a metal catwalk while forklifts moved below. She pointed to a loading lane where trucks kept backing up. What do you see? Bad routing. More. One supervisor approves everything personally. People are waiting because one person likes control. She looked pleased. Excellent. Then she turned to me. Waste hides behind ego more often than theft. I never forgot that sentence. Years later, it explained half my family. By the time I graduated university, I knew things no one in my house respected. How to tell when a tenant planned to leave before saying it. How to read morale by how fast staff answered emails. How to know a project was vanity by who loved announcing it. How to distinguish growth from motion. How to tell whether numbers were healthy or cosmetically arranged. At 22, I had instincts and no glamour. At 24, Julian had prestige and applause. Guess which one my father valued? One rainy evening, I visited Margaret for tea at her penthouse. She had grown thinner, though she still dressed sharper than women half her age. I told her about a failing site I'd helped stabilize through rent adjustments and parking redesign. Then, asked a strange question. If I gave you power tomorrow, would you enjoy it? I laughed. You're asking the wrong granddaughter. I'm asking the correct one. I don't know, I admitted. She seemed satisfied. Good, why? Because people who hunger for power often use it badly. She sipped tea. People who fear it sometimes use it responsibly. Then she looked directly at me. Your brother impresses rooms. A pause. You understand systems. Not practical. Not steady. Not trying. Capable. Useful. Potentially dangerous if placed correctly. I walked home that night feeling taller than usual. Not because I had changed. Because for 2 hours, someone had spoken to the version of me that was real. And somewhere beneath the family story built around Julian, my grandmother had already begun writing another one. When Julian officially joined Halden Retail Group, my parents treated it like a royal succession. Flowers filled the lobby. Champagne appeared before noon. A photographer had been hired for internal communications, which in my family meant public worship with budget approval. My mother wore white. My father wore the expression of a man congratulating himself for genetics. And Julian arrived 20 minutes late. Not accidentally. He stepped out of the elevator in a tailored navy suit, open collar, expensive watch visible just enough to be noticed. He kissed my mother's cheek, clasped my father's shoulder, shook hands with senior staff, and smiled at the room like gratitude itself had cheekbones. People applauded without being asked. That was always his real talent. My father tapped a spoon against a glass. Today marks the beginning of Halden Group's next era. More applause. My son Julian joins us as Executive Vice President of Strategic Growth. Strategic Growth. A title broad enough to mean power and vague enough to survive failure. He brings elite training, modern vision, and the leadership instincts this company needs. Then my father glanced toward me, where I stood beside the coffee station with 3 regional managers. And Naomi will continue helping operations. Helping operations. That was my introduction. No title, no mention that I had already spent years solving expensive problems executives preferred not to hear about. No mention that 2 properties I'd quietly stabilized were now among our strongest performers. Just helping operations. One manager beside me muttered, "That's brutal." I smiled politely. When humiliation becomes familiar, you stop reacting publicly. You just remember it accurately. Julian's first office was on the 32nd floor. Corner glass, skyline view, Italian desk. Mine remained on 7 beside the service corridor with one drawer that jammed every Tuesday. His first week involved investor lunches and strategy briefings. Mine involved sewage backups, payroll errors, and a furious bakery tenant threatening legal action. He was introduced to possibilities. I was introduced to consequences. Within 2 months, the company began speaking Julian's language. Transformation, acceleration, brand elevation, premium repositioning, synergy. Every presentation gained more slides and less truth. Budgets shifted too. More money for image campaigns, more money for consultants, less money for maintenance, less patience for site complaints. I noticed, because complaints arrived faster and repairs took longer. Then came Julian's first major idea. He wanted to lease premium storefronts in 3 suburban centers to luxury lifestyle brands seeking expansion. On paper, rents looked impressive. In reality, those customers did not shop there. I reviewed traffic data, household spending, repeat visits, parking behavior, tenant mix. Wrong audience, wrong identity, wrong pricing. I requested 10 minutes with Julian. He gave me 7. His office smelled like cedar and expensive confidence. I placed reports on the table. These leases will fail. He leaned back. That's a dramatic opener. They're wrong for the locations. Based on income mix, family traffic, repeat behavior, local spend. He smiled. You've become very confident. I'm trying to save us money. No, he said softly. You're mistaking familiarity with importance. I held his gaze. These stores won't last 18 months. He folded his hands. This is why perspective matters, Naomi. You work close to the ground. A pause. Useful, but limited. Then came the smile that had protected him all his life. Leave altitude decisions to people at altitude. I stood. You know what altitude can't smell? He frowned. What? Smoke. Then I walked out. 9 months later, 2 of the 3 luxury tenants negotiated exits. The 3rd delayed rent repeatedly. No one mentioned my warning. Failure moves quietly when powerful people caused it. Success gets catered. At Thanksgiving that year, my father announced Julian had been invited to speak on a retail innovation panel. My mother nearly cried. Then she turned to me. And Naomi, still busy? Still busy. That week I had prevented a union complaint, replaced a failed contractor, and negotiated a retention package for a grocery anchor considering exit. But yes, Julian spoke for 20 minutes about customer ecosystems. People leaned in like disciples. I looked down the table. Margaret was watching me. Later, while coats were being gathered, she stopped me in the hallway, walked me upstairs. I followed her slowly. At the landing, she paused, then said, "Your brother thinks leadership is being believed." I waited. She looked directly at me. It is being correct when no one claps. I stood there hearing laughter below from something Julian had said. For the first time, I wondered if my grandmother wasn't merely encouraging me. Maybe she was measuring all of us, and maybe the score was not what my father believed. By spring, more cracks appeared. Senior operations staff resigned. Vendor trust weakened because payments slowed. Marketing invoices ballooned. Regional directors privately complained that Julian promised timelines impossible to execute, and still, publicly, he shined. Trade magazines called him the dynamic future of Halden retail. My mother clipped every article. My father framed one in the board hallway. No one framed the rise in turnover. No one framed the emergency repairs caused by delayed maintenance. No one framed the weekends I spent reopening damaged centers while executives attended charity galas. Then one Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. Her voice sounded thinner than I had ever heard it. "Come tomorrow. Is everything okay?" "No," she said calmly. Then the line disconnected. I stared at the phone. For the first time in years, I felt something stronger than frustration. Fear. Because if Margaret Halden sounded fragile, the only person in my family who truly understood what was happening might be running out of time. I went to my grandmother's penthouse the next morning before work. The apartment overlooked the river and carried the kind of wealth that never needs to prove itself. Old wood floors, fresh flowers, quiet art, everything chosen, nothing flaunted. Margaret sat by the window with a blanket over her knees. For the first time in my life, she looked smaller than the room around her. I hated that immediately. "You're late," she said. "I'm 5 minutes early." Then why did it feel late? Illness had weakened her body, not her standards. I kissed her cheek and sat across from her. Medical papers rested on a side table in a neat stack. I glanced at them. "Boring documents," she said. "Ignore them." I obeyed. She poured tea with slower hands than I remembered, then asked the question without warning. "How bad is it?" I knew what she meant. "The company? What else in this family is worth discussing?" So I told her the truth. Vacancy risk rising in 3 centers, cash reserves tightening, prestige leases underperforming, delayed maintenance becoming liability, strong operators resigning, vendors losing trust, too many decisions flowing upward to people who enjoyed power more than responsibility. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded once. "And your father?" "Still believes confidence is competence." "And Julian?" I hesitated. She noticed. "Say it." I said carefully, "But he treats consequences like something that happens later to someone else." That made her smile. Cruel. A beat. Accurate. Then her face settled. "Naomi, look at me." I did. I built Halden Group by fearing waste more than embarrassment. She adjusted the blanket. "Your father fears embarrassment more than waste." She let the sentence hang. "That reversal ruins companies." My throat tightened. "Then stop him." "No," she said it calmly. "I'm dying." Some words divide life into before and after. Those 3 did. I stared at her. She reached for the teapot. "Don't look shocked. Doctors have become boringly unanimous." I laughed once through tears I hadn't approved. She handed me a linen napkin. "Use that. Tears stain silk." Even then, no melodrama. Then she leaned beside her chair and lifted a dark leather case, heavy enough that I took it with both hands. She placed a sealed envelope on top. "Do not open these yet." "What are they?" "Timing." "Grandma." "Listen." Her voice sharpened into command. "When people tell the truth too early, they are ignored." She pointed at the case. "When they tell it too late, it becomes decoration." I held it tighter. "When do I open it?" "When they erase you in public." I frowned. "They already do that privately." "That is rehearsal," she said. "I mean publicly." I wanted answers. Instead, I asked the real question. "Why me?" For the first time that morning, she looked tired. She pointed lightly toward me. "You want things to work." Then she added, "One can be trained, the other cannot." I stayed another hour. We spoke about small things after that. A bakery she still hated for replacing butter with trends. My terrible haircut at 17. A board member she considered decorative furniture. When I rose to leave, she said one last thing. "Do not become sentimental after I'm gone." "Why?" "It leads to weak decisions." 3 months later, she died. The obituary called her visionary, pioneer, philanthropist, beloved matriarch. All true. None complete. At the funeral, my father gave a polished speech about legacy. My mother cried beautifully. Julian looked solemn, in a charcoal suit expensive enough to insult grief. Executives praised her standards. Developers praised her courage. Board members praised her instincts. I stood in the second row thinking, most of you loved the myth of her. Very few loved the woman. After the burial, my father announced there would be a memorial gala in 6 months. To honor Margaret's life, he said, and celebrate the future of Halden Group. Even mourning in our family needed branding. I placed the leather case in my apartment closet. I thought about opening it every week, sometimes every day. I never did. Partly because I respected her instructions, partly because I still hoped I was wrong about my family. That they were shallow, yes, blind, often, but not cruel enough to erase me publicly. Then summer came. Another expensive image campaign launched, while repairs were delayed. 2 respected operators resigned. I was excluded from a restructuring meeting involving regions I supervised. When I asked why, HR said attendance had been limited to strategic personnel. Strategic personnel? I nearly laughed. Later that week, I overheard 2 executives in the hallway. Victor's making it official soon. At the gala? Perfect setting. And Naomi? A pause. Decorative casualty. They noticed me standing there and froze. I smiled pleasantly and walked on. That night, I opened my closet and stared at the leather case. When they erase you in public, I still wanted to believe it wouldn't happen. Then, the gala invitations arrived. Mine came by courier. Cream cardstock. Gold lettering. Table 26. No family designation. No +1. No role listed. That evening, my mother posted Julian's invitation online. Join us as we celebrate the next chapter of Halden Group under Julian Halden's leadership. I placed both invitations side by side on my kitchen table. One made me logistics. One made him destiny. Something cold and clear moved through me. Not rage, recognition. They were going to use my grandmother's memorial to crown my brother, and somewhere inside that leather case sat the reason Margaret Halden had expected exactly this. I moved it to the front shelf, not to open, not yet, just to remember something I had forgotten while trying to be patient. Some doors do not open with kindness. Some open only when insult turns the key. The Meridian Grand Hotel had the kind of lobby designed to make ordinary people lower their voices. Marble floors polished like mirrors. Chandeliers large enough to suggest electricity existed only for decoration. Staff who moved so quietly they seemed trained to apologize for sound. Halden Group rented the grand ballroom for what my father called a dual-purpose evening, to honor Margaret Halden's legacy and celebrate the company's future. In other words, grief first, coronation second. 400 guests attended. Investors, bankers, board members, developers, political donors, old family friends who praised loyalty while checking net worth. My mother had planned every detail. Flowers, menus, lighting, guest flow, seating charts, especially seating charts. I know because she intercepted me before I entered the ballroom. Elaine Halden wore midnight blue silk and diamonds heavy enough to fund scholarships. You're late. It's 6:58. Then emotionally late. She handed me my place card. Table 26. Near the rear service doors, I looked past her. Tables 1 through 6 surrounded the stage. Board members occupied the inner ring. Family allies sat close. My brother's future in-laws had better seats than I did. Is this a mistake? I asked. Her smile remained perfect. No. It's practical. She adjusted my necklace without permission. You'll be more comfortable with operations staff. Comfortable. The elegant word people use when insulting you politely. I work with many of them. Exactly. Then she lowered her voice. Tonight is important, Naomi. Please don't make anything about yourself. She turned away before I could answer. That was her talent. Delivering wounds while preserving posture. I found table 26 near 2 swinging service doors where waiters emerged carrying trays. Each time they opened, warm kitchen air spilled into the ballroom. My table mates included a retired contractor, 2 district supervisors, and a cousin who once asked if operations was basically customer service. They looked embarrassed for me. I thanked them by pretending not to notice. At 8:30, lights dimmed, a tribute video began. My grandmother appeared in black and white photographs, breaking ground at construction sites, reviewing plans, shaking hands with mayors, standing in heels on muddy lots, beside men who underestimated her. The room applauded. I did too. Then the screen changed. My father walked on stage. Victor Halden wore a black tuxedo, and the expression of a man who believed history should be grateful for him. That was always dangerous. He praised Margaret's discipline, courage, instincts, standards. He called her the foundation of everything we had. Then he shifted. As we honor where we came from, we must also celebrate where we are going. The screen behind him lit with Julian. Professional portraits, boardroom photos, conference photos. My brother smiling against skylines as if he personally invented cities. Applause began before my father continued. I am proud to formally appoint Julian Halden as president of Halden Retail Group. The room rose. Standing ovation. Julian walked to the stage smiling modestly, the way practiced people do when receiving what they expected all along. My mother cried into a tissue she had almost certainly prepared in advance. My father embraced him. Cameras flashed. Then came the second blade. As part of our long-term transition plan, all future executive succession authority will proceed through Julian. More applause. Meaning everything. Meaning control. Meaning the family story would continue exactly as written. Then my father laughed lightly and added, and Naomi, of course, will always have a place supporting greatness. The room released polite laughter. Not cruel laughter. Worse, social laughter. The kind people give when hierarchy has spoken and they want to stay safe. At my table, one supervisor whispered, Jesus. The retired contractor stared into his water glass. A cousin leaned toward me. So what exactly do you do there? I looked at the stage. My father glowing. My mother radiant. My brother crowned. And suddenly I understood something painful and clean. They had not forgotten me. They had placed me exactly where they wanted me. Visible enough to diminish. Far enough to dismiss. Then a voice behind me said quietly, she chose the timing well. I turned. An older man stood there in a charcoal suit, silver hair, posture precise enough to suggest a lifetime of being obeyed in difficult rooms. Naomi Halden? Yes. My name is Adrian Cross. He offered a hand. I shook it automatically. I represented Margaret Halden privately for 14 years. My pulse changed. I don't believe we've met. She preferred secrecy when intelligence was involved. From inside his jacket, he removed a cream envelope sealed in dark wax. M.H. My grandmother's initials. She instructed me to deliver this, only if your family publicly erased you. My fingers went cold. What is it? The correction. He placed it in my hand, then added, you have 3 working days. Before I could ask anything else, he disappeared back into the crowd, with the skill of a man used to detonating rooms quietly. I stared at the envelope. Hands trembling, I broke the seal. Inside was an amended will. Legally executed. Witnessed. Precise. One sentence changed the temperature of the night. To my granddaughter Naomi Halden, I leave 52% controlling voting interest in Halden Retail Group, effective upon lawful activation. I read it again. 52%. Control. There was more. Condition of transfer. Beneficiary must request an emergency board meeting within 3 working days of receipt. Failure to do so voids this amendment. Then, I unfolded the handwritten note tucked behind it. Your brother loves winning. Your father loves control. Your mother loves appearances. You love things that work. Choose wisely. I looked up at the stage. Guests lined up to congratulate the future king. My father laughed with investors. My mother glowed beside cameras. No one noticed that the ordinary daughter at table 26 had just become the most powerful person in the family. I folded the papers carefully, stood, and walked toward the service corridor, not because I was upset, because I needed privacy to begin a war. I stood in the service corridor behind the ballroom while waiters rushed past me carrying champagne and plated sea bass. No one looked twice. That was the useful thing about being invisible. People assume you are harmless. I read the will again under fluorescent lights beside stacked linen carts. Then a third time. Every page was exact, witnessed, Notarized. Prepared by Adrian Cross and Associates. My grandmother had not left me money. She had left me leverage, and she had attached a clock to it. 3 working days. Not 3 days. 3 working days. Meaning she expected chaos. Meaning she knew they would pressure me, delay me, shame me, distract me. She had written a clause for someone forced to think clearly while disrespected. I folded the documents and returned to the ballroom with a calm face. My father was laughing with investors. My mother was receiving compliments as if she had personally created success. Julian stood surrounded by younger executives, eager to orbit new power. No one noticed me walk past them. No one noticed me leave. I got home at 10:15. My apartment was a 1-bedroom rental with stubborn windows, radiator heat, and plumbing that sighed like it regretted commitment. The kind of place my family called fine for now. I placed the envelope on my kitchen table and called Adrian Cross. He answered on the second ring. I wondered how long it would take. Is it real? Yes. Can they stop it? They can challenge it. Stopping it is another matter. Why the 3 working days? A pause. Your grandmother believed hesitation was your greatest weakness. That hurt because it was true. She also believed pressure would reveal whether you were ready. I looked at the envelope. What do I need? 3 board members to support an emergency petition. I already have 1 likely yes. Who? She valued preparation. Sleep if you can. We start at 7. I did not sleep. I made tea I never drank. Walked circles through my apartment. Imagined every version of the next week. My father disowning me. My mother crying publicly. Julian calling me jealous. Executives treating me like an emotional inconvenience. Then I imagined doing nothing. Returning to work. Watching Julian inherit everything. Listening to people say, he earned it. That thought steadied me more than courage. At 7:03, Adrian called. Yes. Good. We're meeting Margaret Coleman at 8. Margaret Coleman had served on our board for 30 years and once rescued the company during a brutal recession. Sharp eyes, no wasted words. She met us in a private room above an old cafe downtown. She studied me before speaking. So, you're the granddaughter who listens. She spoke of me? She complained about nearly everyone, Margaret said dryly. She praised almost no one. Adrian handed her the will, then looked at me. Do you want revenge or responsibility? The question landed hard. I want the company protected. She nodded. Better answer than most heirs give. She signed immediately. 1, Adrian said. By noon, Richard Velez signed. A veteran real estate operator my father had sidelined after warnings about debt exposure. Victor mistakes confidence for math, he muttered. By 3, Susan Kwan signed. Supplier representative. Impossible to charm. Your brother talks about ecosystems, she said. He still pays invoices late. 3 signatures. Enough. The petition was filed at 4:42. Emergency board meeting. Wednesday, 10 a.m. 3rd working day. My phone rang before I reached the elevator. My mother. What have you done? Honored grandma's wishes. You are humiliating your father. No, I said calmly. That was last night. She gasped and hung up. Julian called next. This is emotional sabotage. It's governance. You don't understand what you're triggering. Maybe I understand better than you. His voice hardened. You've always resented me. I almost laughed. No, I resented being dismissed by people who confuse applause with value. Silence. Then coldness. If you do this, there's no path back. There never was. I ended the call. At 6:30, my father arrived at my apartment. He had never visited before. That alone told me everything. Victor stood in my narrow hallway, looking offended by the dimensions. We need to talk. We are. He glanced around. You live like this by choice? No, by compensation. He ignored the strike. You're emotional because of the gala. I'm strategic because of the gala. His jaw tightened. Whatever fantasy my mother filled your head with, companies are not run by sentiment. No, I said. They're ruined by ego. For a second, something dangerous crossed his face. Then he changed tactics. I can make this easy. There it was, the offer. Name it. Vice president title, better salary, public recognition, equity package. Recognition. Always the cheapest currency they owned. And the company? Julian is prepared. I opened the front door. We should leave. He stared at me. You are making the biggest mistake of your life. I held his gaze. No. Then I gave him the truth. The biggest mistake of my life was waiting this long. He walked out, without another word. I locked the door, then sat on the floor and shook for 10 full minutes. Not from fear, from finally choosing myself. The next 48 hours became a campaign. Executives who forgot my birthday wanted coffee. People who ignored my emails wanted partnership. Messages arrived, offering compromise, unity, healing, family. Power restores memory quickly. I accepted none of it. Instead, I prepared. Lease losses, cash decline, vendor distrust, executive turnover, prestige waste, deferred maintenance. I printed board packets, rehearsed answers, chose one gray suit. And on the night before the meeting, I placed my grandmother's note beside the bed. You love things that work. For the first time in my life, I understood something dangerous. Ordinary people become powerful the moment they stop accepting disrespect. The Holden Group boardroom sat on the 37th floor, wrapped in glass and ego. The city stretched in every direction below us, towers shining, traffic moving, thousands of ordinary people already solving problems no one in that room could name. My father believed architecture should intimidate. Long walnut table, leather chairs, muted art, perfect lighting. A wall of framed milestones celebrating company growth. If you looked closely, Victor Halden stood near the center of almost every photograph. Even memory had been curated. I arrived at 9:40, early enough to breeze, late enough not to wait publicly. The receptionist who had ignored me for years stood when I approached. Good morning, Miss Halden. Interesting. Power had already updated my title. Inside, board members were settling into seats. Others stood in small clusters, speaking too softly. My father sat at the head of the table, reviewing papers with theatrical calm. Julian sat to his right, jaw tight, pretending to check messages. My chair had been placed near the far end. I walked to it, then lifted it and moved it 3 seats closer to center. No one objected. That silence taught me more than words. Adrian Cross entered carrying a slim briefcase. He nodded once, but did not smile. At 10 sharp, Robert Hensley, board chairman, called the meeting to order. This emergency session has been petitioned under shareholder authority. We will first verify submitted documentation. My father leaned back. Before we waste valuable time, I'd like the record to note this process appears emotionally motivated. There it was, the oldest weapon against women in serious rooms. Emotion. Robert did not look up. Noted. Adrian stood. He presented the amended will, witness signatures, trust instruments, and controlling share mechanism. No drama. Facts are most dangerous when calm. When he finished, Robert adjusted his glasses. Documentation appears valid. Pending routine confirmation. Effective provisionally. Naomi Halden now controls 52% voting interest in Halden Retail Group. My father's hand tightened around his pen. Julian spoke first. This is absurd. Naomi has no executive qualifications. I looked at him. You had none when appointed EVP. 2 directors looked down to hide reactions. He flushed. That was different. Yes, I said. You were male and applauded. My father slapped the table lightly. Enough. He turned to the board. My daughter has operational experience. Complaints, vendors, site issues, useful work.